All right, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, before we started recording, I was like, hey, how are things going? You said more the same, but better. What does that mean?
I found in my time that, the issues that you're tackling don't just like go away,
Okay.
right? And I don't know how else to say it other than it's work, man. It's just work. You just got to keep working at some of those issues that keep coming up, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously they're not resolved. You have to get yourself to a place where it's at least defined for you and you're able to approach it with kind of some of the stuff that we were talking about last time, your values, your et cetera. You
Hmm.
forget those over time. I mean, think about it. Like, we're if you break a diet or whatever, right? The idea behind it is just going back to that well and like redefining it, understanding what kind of position you're in life, what's changed, what's not, and just look at it differently. Sometimes those problems just need a different approach. So I don't know. Didn't want to be like too prophetic in it. It's
Yeah.
just, that some of these things, like some of the, family issues or whatever, right? I'm now approaching with a better understanding of what the relationship is actually going to be in
Yeah.
the future, right? Or at least how it works for me in the
Hmm.
future, right?
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because just the family stuff as far as perspective goes. My stepdad, he's very, I wouldn't say passive, but he's not judgy. He doesn't force his thoughts on people, and the best way he sees to change minds is more or less in years or decades. And he says, hey, if we're fighting and we're not speaking at all, then I have no chance. But maybe in 5 years, and when I think about that, I'm like, what do you mean? I just got to give them facts and tell them how it is. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I definitely need to work on that. But
You
it's interesting what you learn from people.
you've got your truth, right?
Hmm.
And they've got their truth. Sometimes they're different, right? I
Yeah.
mean, especially when you're a kid and your memories are different, right? And you don't have the full context of
Right.
everything, right?
Hmm.
So there is some validity to that. But now, as an adult, right, you get to choose, how much you engage or how you engage or uh, what topics you're even going to bring up.
Yeah.
And, I'll may spout some stuff off about my stepdad as well, but it's interesting the difference in like living under the household, right? And being in that age, you got hormones and whatever it included in the mix, but now there's more understanding, I think, and we're able to have better conversations than we've ever had.
Yeah.
Um, Part of the stuff is what I'm working on. Part of the stuff I know he went through, he's gone through some stuff that has changes his perspective on life. Still at its core though, you find the things where you take, right? The whole
Yeah.
purpose of like continuing on life and whatever is to take all these learnings and filter it, right? This
Hmm.
works for me, this doesn't work for me, right? We do this with our parents. I'm sure, tell me like one thing that you've changed in your life based off of things that you grew up
Yeah.
like not agreeing with,
Hmm.
right?
No,
And you can
100%.
probably
I would say
you
my mom was always, oh, look at the other person's perspective. And like we had a knockout drag out fight with one of our a good friend, and I was just furious with him. My mom's like, "Oh, like what perspective are they coming from?" And it was with my wife, I was just kind of part of the conversation. My wife came around before I did, and I was like, "Oh man." I was like even though I may be frustrated and this
yeah,
is how I feel about it, not necessarily agreeing with the other person, but seeing where they're coming from does help a lot.
for sure. And it doesn't mean that you have to like forgive them
Hmm.
or I mean forgiveness is like the state like we look at forgiveness a lot of times like I have to tell that person that I forgive them
Yeah.
and that they're just gonna their behavior will change or whatever because I've forgiven them. So it's not really for them. It's actually
Yeah.
for you. You're forgiving them in your heart. Like, hey, like I know where you came from. I understand it. Still doesn't align with my boundaries or
Mhm.
whatever, right?
So when you're going into these conversations or just improving these things in your life, do you have it like planned out like this day I'm gonna go do this? How do you make sure that that works into your life?
That's a very interesting question, I will say, because I wing it,
Hmm.
but I'm winging it with filters
Okay.
now, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
right? It's like, okay, what sporting event happened?
Right.
What thing can we talk about to start off with? But I have actually came to a better place in being able, like, as a businessman. My dad started his own business. He owns a farm up in Washington, a lavender
Yeah.
farm, right? So just I think that understanding as we're both kind of growing in this role that we've taken on
Yeah.
has allowed us to have some common ground. Hi there.
Okay.
All smiles. Hi.
All right, you want to say
How you
bye?
doing?
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Nice to meet you. Uh, that's awesome. Uh, I think that ultimately I've been able to come to him with some of my problems
Yeah.
more. Now, I know what he's going to say, kind of talked about it, right? But if I can like set up the question or if I can frame it in a way that gets us to where I feel like there's something
Right.
mutual out of it, that's awesome. But back to the point that I was talking about, where you kind of have to understand where this relationship is going,
Right.
you know, in your head, like what kind of response you're going to get, right?
Right.
Already. So if you can curtail your message going into that conversation to understand that, like, hey, I want this relationship to be this way, but the hardest
Right.
part about having a relationship is that it takes two people with two different backgrounds, experiences, all that. It's the hardest thing to do, man.
Yeah.
And so when you go into that conversation, you have to realize like it's probably going to be in this box that I've already kind of identified.
Yeah.
And so within that box, right? How do we stay within that box? How do
Hmm.
I not bring up something that's, the type of stuff that you don't want to bring up at the Thanksgiving table or
Right.
whatever, right? Like, how do I avoid those and just kind of get what I need out of this conversation,
Yeah.
right?
So, in your life these days, with work, your girlfriend, and all these things going on, do you have to plan when you're going to see family? Is it just special occasions? What's going on there?
Everything I'm probably on like a 2 week planning schedule as it
Okay.
is how it's been. I'm trying to get better at that. That's
Yeah.
something that I've learned more is you really do have to be just intentional with your time.
Yeah.
Everything. Put it on the calendar months later. Um, however, you know, it has been a little bit more on the fly. It's tough because I'm down here in Phoenix versus, most of my family's up in Washington. I have family in Missouri. But
Yeah.
it kind of gets to the point where like this was the point of doing all this,
Right.
right? The point of doing all this was to create my own life and now, is the opportunity for the family to come to me
Right.
versus, be all involved in their business. I've got a whole life that I've created down here,
Yeah.
you know?
That's fantastic. And
Yeah.
how would you say that the work stuff is going for you? And then obviously that's a kind of broad question, but how do you categorize like where you are work wise?
More lessons.
Okay.
I thought like, you know, I thought going into this that some of those lessons would be more impactful,
Okay.
get you further along, right?
Hmm.
But I'm coming to find that there's new things every time in this way that I'm doing it.
Yeah.
There's successful business owners that I'm connected to that things are going well. They
Yeah.
blew past that whole uh adage that it takes 3 years to grow be profitable. They were
Yeah.
profitable year one, right? And
Hmm.
and millions in sales and yada yada.
Yeah.
Um Ultimately what it has kind of come down to in this the way that I'm going about it, solo entrepreneur, part-timers, yada yada, just trying to build a model more
Yeah.
so. I've realized I try to approach this problem with 100 different answers, all at once, and now it's cutting back and
Okay.
saying what is priority, what matters, right? And some of those lessons are were financially huge,
Yeah.
right? And the stress and the burden that comes along with that, but signed up for it, and
Hmm.
sometimes you realize like if I want this role, if I've taken on this role, the realm of problems could be limitless. You don't
Yeah.
know what those problems are because especially for me, this is my first whack at doing it. Maybe when I run my second business, my third business, my whatever, I'll be set up better. But
Hmm.
for now, this is number one. And so of course these problems are going to be new. Of course these issues are going to take mulling over, man. I lose sleep over it. So yeah, I don't know. It's
What have been some of the big changes that you've made that you're like, this was great that I learned this lesson. Now I'm happy that I'm in this new position though.
um people,
Okay.
people, the right people,
Yeah.
your culture, your everything that you build doesn't work unless you have the right people. And you can say AI can do this and that for you. We're still in the limitations of AI, right? We're
Yeah.
not it's getting better every single day. Trust me, big advocate on it. I'm learning it in and out. However, um, at the end of the day, I still genuinely think that people want to do business with people. That's how I've got most of my business is
Yeah.
referrals, handshakes, friends, whatever. Um, and I know at some point that will run dry, but
Hmm.
the tone can't change, right? The tone can't change whether
Right.
it's that person or another person. So um I think what I've learned most is that it just takes the right clients, right
Yeah.
people in your client base, the right people in who are helping you do this business. This is your business. They could give,
Hmm.
two damns about whether or not you are successful. They just need a paycheck sometimes,
Yeah.
Um, and so really realizing like what type of culture am I gravitating toward? Are these
Yeah.
people about it? Because I'm about it. I lose sleep over it. I stay up till 2 a.m. whatever. I want to be surrounded by people that care about like what they put their name on.
Yeah.
And even if they don't stay with me or work with me forever, I hope that they gain something from it that helps them on their career path. But
Yeah.
ultimately, the culture gets started. You create this framework for this culture, and it's not ping pong tables and treats and stuff like that. It's
Yeah.
how does this person approach work? How does this person do they care about their work?
So do you find that out during an interview process? Do you have like a certain question that has seemed to work for you very well? My wife, when she hires assistants, I wouldn't necessarily say it's busy work, but like it's a lot of work. She's found that ex-teachers or stay-at-home moms that were teachers are very efficient. They get work done. They'll come to you with different solutions and like she's had her best success with that. Have you found anything not similar as far as like the teachers things go, but like where have
Yeah.
you found good success as far as employees or people to work with?
You're almost looking for a persona in that
Okay.
case, right? Like you've set up, by saying teachers or administrative work or whatever,
Yeah.
you know what type of work comes with that. And if that
Hmm.
person stayed with that industry for a long time or um, has the experience with reputable companies, whatever,
Yeah.
and the standard that those employees are held to at that company, right? Like uh Chick-fil-A, you go there, you expect a my pleasure, right? Right? Like they're
Which is
held
yeah,
to
it's wild, but it's always a great experience. Like I have
right?
not had a bad time there yet.
That's culture. That's
Yeah.
brand. That's brand is culture in that case. You're hiring that persona.
Okay.
The intangibles and the tangibles that come with that to a certain degree, right?
Yeah.
I like to get to know the person on a level that makes me know that like their brain's kind of going in the right process,
Right.
right? especially in design and marketing work and stuff, we have to portray a feeling. I've always said that we're trying to create pretty pictures that sell,
Yeah.
basically. Um, but it has to drive an emotion to that. So does that person have like an emotional response or has strategy, pop up in their brain or even think about who is this like advertising towards?
Yeah.
I asked them what have been some of their favorite campaigns that have been out there. What would have you done differently? Do you know who they were talking to?
Right.
Because that if I can get that question, then I know we're talking on the same field,
Hmm.
right? And so ran into that in interviews. And honestly, this is new. This is new learnings for me as I'm going through another round of like part-time hiring or whatever, right? So
Right.
um I would say that I've got like this format down, but it only works for design.
Okay.
So now you have to like think about, what kind of person do I want who, receives the calls, or what kind of person do I want that does account management,
Right.
right? It's similar process of like, okay, has this person worked with B2B before? Because
Okay.
that's part of it, right?
Hmm.
B2C, mass approach, talking to 1,000 people at once, yada yada, um, is different
Yeah.
than trying to build a relational type of sale with somebody.
Hmm.
And that's where kind of, people people tend to forget, and where I'll piggyback again off the whole AI thing is like
Right.
you're building a rapport with this person. You're building trust with the client that ultimately is going to pay you tens of thousands of dollars out of their budget,
Hmm.
right? To take a chance on you.
Yeah.
Why should they? So that has to be represented in that person, right? That knows that that's the playing field that they're playing on.
Hmm. Have you seen a lot of change in what your job is as far as like what the client's asking for? Because I know when you worked for when you were working for that large company that was doing a bunch of sales, there was like a specific thing. This is what's working. We're gonna keep doing this. We're gonna hammer it. What does it look like? What your customers looking like for now?
Yeah. Right now, heavy in tax resolution, as mentioned, as an industry.
Okay.
I would say like lead generation is like kind of where we're pivoting for,
Okay.
right? You got to meet your clients where they're at, right?
Yeah.
You're not in business without your clients.
Yeah.
And so through that and learning and getting clients that simply just wanted leads, realizing that there's more problems at hand. And maybe this is my brain, and just how it works or whatever, but I've always looked at something and said like, how could that be better? How could that
Yeah.
function better, whatever. And so a lot of times you get into these lead gen specific type clients and they don't have the tech infrastructure behind it.
Okay.
They don't have the sales personnel to handle the volume, yada yada. So you end up getting into some a more of a consultation conversation, and that's where you get upsells, incremental spend, etc. I remember vividly being at a particular ad company that I worked for,
Yeah.
um, that we always tried to like sell the kitchen sink, right?
Mhm.
Like when we got in and you were cool with just doing social media ads, guess what? There's another salesperson that's going to jump on the phone and tell you, hey, have you checked out our website or whatever?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, that $5,000 deal is now a $30,000 deal. And
Yeah.
they're like, look, it may be a problem, but I just don't have
Right.
$30,000, to spend right now on a back again to
Yeah.
the trust piece. Like, I don't know you, that's a lot for me to invest up front to a promise, right? And
Yeah.
we never promise results.
Yeah. Oh, and I feel like if you could get make the money off those $5,000, then I think the upsell afterwards would be a pretty good sell. It'd be pretty easy.
Do well on the 5,000, right?
Yeah.
Do well on what you initially sold on, right? Because
Hmm.
that's going to earn their trust. Oh, wow, right? This guy is saying exactly what he sold me on, or we're doing exactly what he sold me on.
Yeah.
Things are going well. Hey, by the way, we've kind of talked about this issue before, or this came to our attention. You know, at the end of the day, you have to make them see that it is also a problem,
Yeah.
right? Again, back to that behavior thing.
Has there been any risk you've taken or like a different approach that you've seen wins off of lately that you want to highlight specifically? Because I read the guerrilla marketing book and I always thought that those were super fun and interesting ideas, but I'm always interested what is actually working or what have you tried and it's like, hey, this actually worked out. Do you have any
Yeah.
specifics on that?
Yeah. I won't give our secret sauce.
Yep.
But ultimately, I would just challenge marketers to look at traditional and how
Yeah.
to like traditional marketing to and wrap it into this digital world, because
Okay.
some of the approaches that we're taking, the TikTok, the whatever, there's this term called I think it's called like ad exhaustion,
Yeah.
or I may be completely off on that, but basically we get tired of seeing all these ads,
Hmm.
and eventually you just kind of tune them out. And we see that, right? They say the average person in like a major city sees anywhere from 4,000 to 10,000 ads a day, or
Woo.
something selling them. Crazy,
Yeah.
right? Um, Knowing that, like, how do you stick out now? Because
Hmm.
everybody's going after the same channels. It's a lot simpler, and start simpler and
Yeah.
build from there. Get the data from the simple, right? That focus on one
Yeah.
area, and do that well, and then grab that data and see where else it can apply. But what I'll say, we're looking into like email more, like
Yeah.
there's tons of really good email marketing agencies out there, but even for clients where one client is $1,000, $10,000 at a pop, like email, you have an email, why
Hmm.
aren't you using it,
Yeah.
right? And it's a way to cut through some of the mass approach.
Yeah. So when you say, I'm just happy to hear that there is a secret sauce that you can't share because whenever I hear marketers or social media people or influencers talk about marketing, they're like, oh, it's just this, this, and this. Um, is there a old recipe that you have that you could share or something I'm trying not to I'm happy to hear there is a secret sauce
Yeah.
because it
and
seems
by no
pretty
and
basic.
by no means is it proprietary,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's not proprietary, it's just overlooked
Yeah.
as
Okay.
marketers, right? And
Hmm.
so I would say that we are in the minority of the marketing agencies that approach it this way. A lot of
Okay.
agencies want to approach things with like a shotgun approach.
Okay.
Let's take that 20,000, let's 10 to 20,000, let's tackle a bunch of target audiences, a bunch of target markets, bunch of different ad copy, bunch of different ad design. All you're doing is diluting that spend
Okay.
overall by trying to go after everybody,
Yeah.
right? We think that we have all this, right? And some companies can. McDonald's, right? They spend $1 billion on marketing and they are able to waste 100 million or
Yeah.
whatever, right? It's all relative in terms of like the percentage and what margin you're willing to take. So at the end of the day, um, my like message from that is go to where your target audience is,
Yeah.
right? Don't put yourself on TikTok if your client is over a certain age or isn't as engaged on that tool. I'm
Yeah.
not anti TikTok by any means, but realize, like, if you're talking to an older demographic, it may not be their primary source
Yeah.
for information, right?
Hmm.
Or leisure time or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So those are kind of the schools of thoughts we challenge just the advertising approach. We approach it structured and with the intention to grow. A lot of our clients, we're not at the McDonald's budget range, so we have to be very intentional with the budgets that we're getting.
Yeah. And would you say when a client comes to you, are they looking for, hey, we need to go super viral, or these are the numbers we want, or we just want better marketing? Like, how do they approach you?
Always, man. I mean, all of the above, right?
Okay.
Um, you got to think of it, right, as a consumer.
Okay.
They're consumers of the information that they're seeing. And much like I saw that, I won't say uh
Thought I got away with it. I'm like, you're right.
yeah. Uh but ultimately, man, it's they're being sold to just like us.
Yeah.
And even the most, man, I've experienced even the most like hard nosed, like this is the way it is, CMOs and CEOs and presidents and whatever get sold on something stupid and flashy that they see on social media.
Yeah.
And it's just the truth. And so a lot of times these conversations are just trying to set expectations. No, I'm sorry. We're not the agency that's going to make your post get 1 million views. And by
Yeah.
the way, is that going to make your sales? Like, is that what you want? Like,
Right.
you got these 1 million views. What have you done with it? That's kind of the piece is like, it's great that you got 1 million views. It has a place in the marketing
Mm.
stack, I guess. But at the end of the day, what do you actually care about? Because you're telling me that sales are down, but you want to get 1 million followers,
Yeah.
right? And like,
99% non-audience, 99% non-followers, zero sales.
yeah, yeah. And so, I leave. I always, if you don't go with like someone we trust, I
Yeah.
always encourage people to hire within, get somebody
Okay.
young, grow up, have them grow up with your company. They're going to be the ones that are going to think outside of the box,
Gotcha.
right?
Okay.
And they're closer to your brand
Yeah.
overall, right? They live it. They hear the ins and outs, the jokes, the clients, there's entire Instagram pages dedicated to restaurant workers that have like the worst clients,
Yeah.
right? Like you can play off that. There's things like that that only somebody who actually works for a company in that industry is going to get, because the truth is I'm a marketing agency. I've
Yeah.
got 5 other clients, right?
Hmm.
As not we're small. So but once that gets bigger, you're going to be on a team of another 5 or whatever, right? We get to 10, there's 5 clients per 5 people or
Yeah.
whatever. Um, at that point, you have to realize like we're being hired to do a specific thing for you.
Hmm.
Now, that specific thing could be soup to nuts, your entire marketing, but you
Yeah.
got to pay for that, right? So if you're paying us for what we told you we would do good on, then we have to align our expectations. This isn't the metric that you came to me with, right? You're not going to get 1 million followers, but what you
Yeah.
are going to get is what you told me that you actually care about,
Hmm.
right?
So, how are you able to keep your thumb on what's going on in your world while you're also working? Do you have like a group of people that you talk to all the time? Do you have to just scroll a lot? What do you do to stay on top of it?
Eventually instincts kind of just kick in, and I hate saying that. I'm not relying 100% on instincts, but it's to this point where I'm getting bite-sized information, and
Yeah.
if it appeals to me like everybody else in social media, then I do the
Yeah.
research on it, right? If I think that it directly affects my business or my client's business or whatever, then
Yeah.
I dive into it. There are some other, this may actually be kind of IP, but we're trying to facilitate this mass amount of information and boil it down into something that's bite size even for us,
Yeah.
because like we said, everything is trying to grab your attention nowadays. And so how you stick out, right? How do you make this knowledge, this information consumable? And
Hmm.
so I tend to gravitate towards my tried and trusted sources, whether that's a human, whether that's a newsletter, whether that's um, even just being able to like go on to LinkedIn and see the trending topics and gather from that where kind of marketing could potentially go, or what kind of policies are coming out that could potentially affect it. I think that's the interesting thing about being a marketer is you're actually pulling from life, because
Okay.
in reality you're dealing with people's psychology.
Yeah. Well, as far as LinkedIn goes, I think I was just on there to see if there's any podcasting jobs in the area. So that's all that's all that would pop up for me. But what do you mean by policies? Like what things would change via LinkedIn for you?
Every time someone goes to a website and they have to click that they accept cookies was a new policy that started when I was midway into this career,
Oh,
right?
right, right, right.
We all had to pivot on the GDPR. That affected everybody, because
What
if
is
anybody has
GD?
a what,
What does that stand for?
oh man, you just had to ask. I've been using that acronym for so long. Man, I don't know.
I'll
I got
raise you.
yeah, let's go. Uh, GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation.
Oh, okay. So that was just all your information was just sponged up and given to whoever wanted it, or how did that work?
Yeah, in the wild, wild west days of the marketing, third-party marketplaces, and still, to be honest, you can get away with this. I'm mum's the word. I'm not saying anything on it, but
Yeah,
data exists. You sign these contracts with wherever you're going with. When you click consent or submit or whatever, read the fine print. It's all there.
yeah,
Um, and then that data was taken and dumped into an ad platform, or just emailed on or whatever, and people were like, how the hell did I end up in this email? And so we're in this interesting kind of consumer perception where we hate ads but we love ads at the same time.
yeah.
uh we tend to hate the ones that annoy us but are happy to purchase ones that actually like align with who we are.
Right.
So um it's an interesting state where some of the old ways still exist. Just have to be more careful. You have to make sure your I's and T's and whatever are all in line. And at the end of the day, um, got to make sure that you're above board from a policy issue, because GDPR is a very, very interesting policy where if somebody is a European citizen and they're in a GDPR uh, country, or one that it's all EU is
Yeah.
all over it, but they can sue your website essentially,
Really?
right? Yeah. So it can get like, especially if you're doing global business.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, what's the standing if you're just in the US and you're a US company, probably need good lawyers, but um yeah, I mean that's how strict if you get caught on these ADA compliancy, right? Your
Okay.
website has to be ADA compliant. A company I worked for got slapped with like a $500,000 fine that they worked down to like 50,000, complying with the ADA so that they can, it was a huge website. We're
Yeah.
talking, 1 million people a month going to it. And
That's a lot of
so,
people.
yeah, so, ultimately, um, these things are, every industry has that thing that they have to watch out for, these things that they have to watch out for. And kind of back to, like what I'm looking for, it's those types of tells, even to the effect we always use this is a prime analogy. I mean, if you were to open up a marketing textbook, they talk about this nowadays, but if you got an ad for an airline company, you're not going to want that ad to run when a airline or a plane crashes, right?
Okay.
You don't
That's fair.
like,
That's a
right?
lot lately.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, right? Just true. It's
Yeah.
it's unfortunate, but from a marketer's perspective, if you're working for an airline, 99% of the time you're not running ads that day, right?
Okay.
You gotta shut them down. So until the dust settles or whatever, because people don't want to see like get $99 fare next
Right.
to like 50 people died in this plane crash, unfortunately. And
It-
God rest their souls and yada yada. But like
yeah.
that's the reality as a marketer, is that you are taking what's happening in the world and applying it and then pushing your message to somebody and hoping it sticks.
Yeah. Do you ever go and look at legacy media, whether it be radio, television, or billboards? Is that anything you'll touch these days?
I get people connected to the right people, or I'll
Yeah.
manage it for them. Um, to actually facilitate that takes a lot of investment
Oh,
from
okay.
as a company, right? Especially if you like own the boards. You know,
Yeah.
you're looking at the one that I can think of up in my hometown is Lamar. Like Lamar owns like all the billboards
Oh,
in
really?
Spokane, Washington. Yeah. So, you know, they've invested in physical property
Yeah.
to market on. Are they useful? You know, there's techniques, there's ways, you know, don't expect a lot of results if you're not putting a billboard in a heavily trafficked area or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Just kind of, it's amazing to me that still to this day, some things are just kind of common sense, but
Mhm.
um, they get overlooked
Yeah.
because you get a client that pays well or whatever, and they have expectations, you know?
Yeah. They want to see what they want to see.
Mhm.
We've been hammering the work stuff pretty good. How's the personal life going? How do you set yourself up for success right now?
Oh, a lot of journaling, a lot of reading. Still on my Stoic kick. Uh, you know, getting back in touch with my faith and a lot of things, honestly, just to kind of set my day up right.
Yeah.
Because truth is just trying to do these, trying to do better should be good enough. And
Hmm.
sometimes it's hard, right?
Yeah.
Because we all have these like expectations of ourselves as well. And just realizing that like the goal isn't to like win the race. You want to, right? The competitiveness in you wants to, but
Yeah.
you have to pat yourself on the back for just training, showing up and getting ready for that race and then putting your foot on the line, right?
So do you have like an hour, 2 hour routine, ice bath, journal, banana on the face, what?
I don't know if I'm rich enough for that yet. I haven't delved into these like pseudosciences and yada yada. I do love a good ice bath, I will
Yeah.
say, but I don't do it consistently, right?
Yeah.
I'm not drinking Kangen water, any, you know, nothing against it, right? The medical facts are there or anything, but for me, it starts in the mind and
Yeah.
just like even getting into that. I would probably have to journal about consistently doing an ice bath,
Yeah.
right? Um, so for me, it's just a quiet hour. Maybe I'm lucky if I even get an hour nowadays, but you know, it's 15 minutes, 30 minutes, setting my intention. I write the same three sentences over and over in my notebook every morning just to like say those affirmations, get them there, align my
Yeah.
brain into like why we're doing this.
If
How
if if you don't mind sharing, could you share what they are?
One's a financial goal. I got really into since I last talked to you, I got into a lot of the teachings from Dr. Nate Zinsser. He has
Okay.
a book called uh gosh, why am I gonna draw a blank now on the book? Um
What's his name? Nate Zinzer?
Nate Zinsser. Yeah. I'm more about the teaching than I am about the title.
You tell me about the book and I'll find it for you.
So the book is this guy was a basically a psychologist, sports psychologist for West Point
Okay.
in uh, New York, and he dealt with like a lot of athletes. But those athletes are also people that have a duty to the army to show up and be generals, captains, or whatever they're going to become, right?
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of those situations were during Iraq, during missions, during yada yada. And
Yeah.
so it varies on it's a very real approach in looking at people that are in high stress situations and how they deal with that and how do you have performance
Hmm.
uh out of it, right? um Took to heart a lot of the things, and at first I thought it was stupid. You know, I was doing the journals, I was saying these affirmations, and I'm like, this is stupid, man. Like,
Yeah.
what am but then stuff started to kind of work, or at least I felt better about things.
Yeah.
And I started looking at it, and of course there were other books along the way, but this kind of set the framework of what I'm working on
Okay.
right now for
Yeah.
that time. Yeah.
No, I broke out the journal last night because I was like, "Ooh, we're doing a good nighttime routine. The lights are off.
Yep.
We're gonna do this." And I went and looked, and it was from like last year when we were in Hawaii. I was like, "Oh man, it's been a minute. There's so many options here." But I really like the journaling, and especially the reading it aloud afterwards because the words or the quote I get from it is words create stories and then stories create reality. And that when I say it and then when I read it, I take a big breath. It seems that my body, I don't know if it's more accepting of it or it is, hey, this is the path we're on, and it just digs that groove a little bit more, makes that path a little bit more accessible. But constantly having that in your morning routine must be nice that you're trucking ahead.
Yeah. Not to say that it's been perfect either.
Mm,
Sometimes I wake up late, and have to fit in that schedule, but I make sure I get it done is
okay.
kind of the thing. Um, and definitely if I'm in a high stress situation and I need to take a moment or whatever, they're tools to go back to
Yeah.
basically. Um, because we're human and we're gonna forget.
So
And
the first one was financial. What are the other two that you write down? The other two sentences.
So the first one, I have a goal that I
Okay.
say that it, and the specific, there's like five different things that I've kind of like put together from this, my own
Yeah.
stuff, whatever. But what I got out of like the affirmation piece of it was that they have to be like I am statements. They have
Right.
to be like you're currently doing them or like
Hmm.
you have done them,
Yeah.
which was the hardest thing because I was a big like I will try, whatever. um Changing that, I think, is kind of talking about what you're referencing is there's a gap. We've talked about the gap of like you're saying these things but you're here, right?
Hmm.
And what do I need to do to make this an actual like truth,
Yeah.
subconsciously, whatever. Talked about faith and stuff before. I really do think that this is actually one of the primary first building blocks to even be open-minded to faith as it is, because
Yeah.
we're all hardwired or whatever with free will, whatever you believe. If you want to do well in that, you have to get this body, this mind, this everything aligned and going that way, right?
Hmm.
Because you make the choice to get out of the bed in the day, what type of day you're going to have, what you're going to go after, what things you're going to get done. Um, and it's a duality. It's a duality between like your ideal self and like these great, I'm going to lose 10 pounds. I'm going to hit
Yeah.
the gym more, etc. I'm going to go to church more. Um, and setting yourself up to actually do those things that you want to do,
Yeah.
right? So the second one is actually a little bit more of like process thing because
Okay.
I tend to get worked up about stuff, man. I mean, I care a lot about the stuff that I'm doing. So, um, sometimes those emotions are not, without a filter in front of it, come out incorrectly, right? And
Okay.
we've all been there. We get too mad at something, whatever. So my second one is I breathe before I take action.
Ooh, I like that.
It's simple, right?
I'm gonna send myself a text on that. I'm like,
Yeah.
we're gonna keep this one around. What was
And
that? I breathe before what?
so the actual full length one that I do, that's the simple one, is I breathe before I take action. But I go a step further and I say I breathe before I take action to align with reason.
Okay.
And
Ooh.
what reason is your alignment, your values, right?
Yeah.
What is big G God, telling me today of like, well, how am I aligned or whatever, right? Of am I taking a breath and stopping this initial knee jerk reaction that I want to have right now because I'm psychologically wired that way?
Yeah.
And am I able to like chew on it for a half second or so and then actually align with really what I want to say, or not lose my cool in that situation, or, you know, it's helped immensely. That's all
Hmm.
I can say.
What would you say that since you more or less prime yourself for it in the morning, as it comes out throughout the day, it's a lot easier to remember that tool?
Breathing in general has
Yeah.
been. I mean, I've also thrown in meditation, all these things, man. I'm just realizing how much like we don't breathe, or
Hmm.
like we breathe incorrectly, and it sounds so weird. And I don't look at it as something that we're doing wrong. I think it's just it's more frequent, right?
Hmm.
Because I mean, if you're, I don't know, Paleolithic days or whatever, and you're like being chased by a bunch of wild animals, of course you're going to be under a lot of stress, right? And you may act differently in those cases. But nowadays, it's just always these
Yeah.
stresses are like in front of you, and yada yada. So it's even more important now to regulate your breathing. And
Yep.
to me, it's just an optimization on your life, right? Like if I can regulate my breathing and get my breathing pattern back to a non-fight or flight kind of approach, and then I can think about this and what would somebody do? What would I do? It has
Yeah.
to be you. What would I do if I was going to approach this the way that I want to?
Hmm.
Right.
Well, and like you said, the breathing and the fight or flight, there's two really good videos that come to my mind. There's an antelope getting chased, and the antelope escapes, and you see it take big breaths so it can get
Mhm.
into that parasympathetic, it can relax. And then
Yep.
there's another one of a polar bear. It was tranked or something like that, and then it was waking up, and you see it going, and then it gets into the big breaths, and it's just like this is natural for the body to do. And then when you get a client or a friend or a child or whoever to do breathing, they're like, oh, wow, I feel so much better. I'm not reacting so aggressively. I'm not doing this. Not to throw my wife under the bus or anything. But if I'm like, hey, like let's take a big breath, it can be a not an exhausting experience, but she is very she's very busy. She's always
Yeah.
doing things. So, if that big belly breath is asked to open up the diaphragm or wherever it is, that is something that's not normal for her. So it's definitely most people in general. The breathing part is something to be desired for sure.
Do you do you feel like that's been effective with your family as well? Because I'm the reason why I ask is
Yeah,
me and my girlfriend are working on these things, our own ways, our own approach, etc. But like
yeah,
some of these things are things that we agree on, right?
yeah.
Like we have to meditate on, we have to take breaths, we do yoga or whatever. We take these times to like be able to slow down for a
Hmm.
second,
Yeah,
right?
I
Whatever,
would
what,
say whenever I either read a book or take a class or a course or get a bunch of information and or listen to a podcast and get really excited about something, I'll just word vomit.
Mhm.
So then I'll try to be I'll slow it down a little bit. I'll kind of rehearse in my head. But the best way I've been able to convey to people is through other people's videos of
Yeah.
explaining it. So it's not me just saying you should be doing this because of this, but just the bear one or the doe one, or like a TED talk that I was listening to on the person has been very beneficial because when I say just usually the way I say something, I'm really excited, like, oh, give this a shot with, and I've listened to something for the last 2 hours or 3 hours, and now I want to do it. And I'm just telling this person out of the blue, give this a shot. It's a little bit harder of an ask.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I don't know, that's kind of where I'm at in my learning phase of like psychology and everything is the behavior piece,
Yeah.
right? And it takes time, right?
Mm.
It's not surgery. You don't go in there for a couple hours and this behavior is changed or
Hmm.
whatever, right? They have to trust you again. So, um, there is like a micro affirmation. I don't even know if you'd call it an affirmation, but one that stuck out. You brought up TED Talks, and
Yeah.
so this kind of sparked my brain. One that's been really useful contradicts uh, Nate Zinsser, so I've amalgamized the two.
Okay.
Can't remember the dude's name, but his he was saying when he's overthinking, he asks himself, uh, are my thoughts useful and how do they behave?
Okay.
Right. So if you're in this like overthinking,
All right.
rabbit hole, right? And you're kind of like, what are these? What is the purpose of these thoughts? Basically, you're asking yourself, are they useful to this end goal that I want to have? If somebody was on the outside looking at these thoughts,
Yeah.
what would that look like to that person? And so to stay in the I action kind of phrase of Nate Zinsser, I've kind of changed that to useful thoughts. Like I just
Hmm.
tell myself useful thoughts,
Yeah.
right? Like, and that gets my brain, I'd say that before a meeting or whatever, what, there's all these thoughts, right? I got to do the dishes to, I have to pay, this loan or
Right.
whatever. And you're going into that meeting with those thoughts, is that useful to that meeting, right? You're supposed to be spending 30 minutes with this person and like trying to solve their problem.
Yeah.
So
So
I
what
found that
what
one helps.
what was the full line? Because that's phenomenal. I think that's a it's a perfect sentence to lead into the next thing that I was going to say. But are the thoughts helpful? And then what?
It's are my thoughts useful
Oh.
and how do they behave?
And how do they behave?
And
So
if
I don't.
in go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know if I shared this last time, but I was in outpatient therapy. My therapist is like, "Hey, you have suicidal ideation," and at the point I was like 17 or 18, a kid with ADHD, and a professional told me, "Hey, this is what you've been thinking about," and I was like, "Oh, okay." So ran with that for like 6 months. I was the happiest person in this suicide or in this outpatient. Everybody was very
Right.
confused. I tried. I'll try not to run through it too quickly, but I tried cutting and self-harm, and I'm like, hey, this isn't for me. Like, not to put it lightly, but it's just like that's not what I didn't have anything I was trying to get away from or control. I was feeling pretty good, other than the part I was thinking about the suicidal ideation all the time. Then there was a point where I was in the gym, and I'm like, hey, what if these things are just thoughts and I'm not actually going to do it? And I would say that was a pivotal moment for me. And that's the best way to explain it. Are these thoughts, I'm going to look at it again. So are these thoughts useful and how do they behave? And like that, I think that capitalizes on that perfectly on how I feel about that thought right there. But I
Yeah.
thought
I mean,
I appreciate you being able to help me narrow that down.
yeah, I mean, absolutely. Think about, look, I feel for you immensely.
Hmm.
I obviously dealing with some of my own anxiety and depression issues. I honestly like there's almost this weird stigma around like as soon as somebody goes into suicidal ideation, it's
Yeah.
like smother them. And you absolutely should. But I almost wonder if it is part of like human nature to like just try to find an easy way out of
Yeah.
things, right? And I say easy lightly. I I and definitely think that like some of these thoughts, right? You become your thoughts.
Hmm.
There's a difference in the reality of what's in your head and what's around you. The reality outside your head could also suck, to be
Right.
honest. But the truth is you don't have an opportunity to change that without
Hmm.
it. And so if these thoughts are going to like compound it, right?
Yeah.
The thoughts are going to like put you in this direction that ultimately hits your end goal, a terrible end goal.
Hmm.
Is that really what you want?
Right.
Right? Like is that really what you want? And that, and can go into like assisted suicide and everything like that, but at that point. But I think the reality is if you have like a desire to like change your situation, you really do have to focus on what is good, like what can I do, what is a
Yeah.
small step in this right direction. One of those things that you can do is filter your thoughts. And man, if it were that easy, obviously I would be doing much better work in this world.
Right.
But uh to be honest, it's tough. It's just such a dark place that your brain takes you
Hmm.
and puts all these things. So
Well, I
um
think it's such an interesting concept. We go through school, obviously, because they were like good workers and also te teach us some skills. And I remember I took one psychology class, and it didn't do so much on how to help people. It's more I just identifying problems and not tips and tricks and stuff like that. So there's a lot of mental health learning that uh, people and men in general kind of have to do on their own. Where you are now in life, do you have like group of friends that you can talk about it, or like how are you as far as the talking about those things?
it's an odd journey. And to be honest, no. The quick answer is no. I don't
Yeah,
have that team anymore because everybody, I don't know if it's, the way that society is or whatever, and respectfully so, everybody's busy,
yeah,
it seems, right? Could be an excuse or whatever. But at the end of the day, is that the support crew, and maybe it doesn't align with this direction I'm heading. We care about different things
yeah.
nowadays, and that's okay. I'm actually in this stage or this period where I'm trying to surround more people that kind of understand it. And
Yeah.
that is a range of people. That could be somebody that has no idea what I do, right?
Hmm.
Or that could be, but they, you know, to a certain degree, two people have to be able to like come together on these things. And uh I've been having trouble like finding that, to be
Yeah.
honest. But if you look in history and you look at everyone from Buddha to Jesus to etc., great thinkers, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, whatever, there has always been this time period of isolated time where
Hmm.
you have to like go and prep yourself to be what you want to be, or
Yeah.
who you're supposed to become. Um, you talked about how that psychology class only gave you like the identifiers. That's the first step to the issue,
Yeah.
right? We get so clouded in these judgments. They're judgments that we've created of this world that paint the picture in our head, that drive our behavior and yada yada, that we tend to like overlook, like, why do I get anxiety over this in the first place? Like, what
Hmm.
is it? Right. And it could be
Yeah.
something deep seated from your childhood that you have to go back to and like really address.
Hmm. As far
So
as the friends and stuff like that goes, I would say the easiest I've talked to people about like the mental health stuff has just been on the podcast
yeah,
because they're just open to sharing their lives and things like that, and it's anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours spending with someone. Um, do you have are you trying to set those kinds of things up? Is it just like a game night? Is it, you said you're re-entering your faith. Do they have, and I think faith is really good for being able to have open discussion. Where do you see it in your life?
I honestly think I'm gonna have to create it. I
Yeah.
think I'm gonna have to create the group, the community, much like yourself. I have to create a forum, right? If
Mhm.
it's something, and selfishly, I want this, right?
Right.
But I kind of feel like there may be, even if it there has to be 0.0001% people in this world or whatever that have something that aligns with how I think, but
Yeah.
that's not the whole point. Like once you get a bunch of people like me in the same room, then nothing's going to get done,
Yeah.
right? So what bits and pieces, you have to have somewhat of a common goal, I
Hmm.
would assume, of to approach this. And back to the culture. Like, what do you stand for, right?
Hmm.
So if you align on that, then the conversations can flow, trust gets built, etc. And I think it's just a smaller group now. I
Hmm.
think it's maybe I was too trusting of a lot of people, or maybe I was just trying to see where my position is in this life, right?
Yeah.
Like who actually aligns with my thought process. I get called out from time to time, and everybody's just kind of drinking and having fun and enjoying themselves. I catch myself thinking about something existential, or
Yeah.
something weird, right? And all of a sudden it's are you having fun at the party, or whatever? And actually, to be honest, I am. This
Yeah.
is the most time that I've been able to like think about it. I've came to this great, conclusion in my head. You have no
Yeah.
idea how great I am or whatever. Maybe I'm not pounding beers or whatever with you, but I'm content like
Yeah.
being in this space. So you gotta kind of just find people that accept that like kind of let you be you and you let them be them, and it works out, right?
Hmm.
And you have a great forum to do that. And it's very easy to talk to you, which is
Yeah.
why
Well,
it's,
thank you.
yeah. And you approach it with, I think, just raw authenticity.
Yeah. Well, I spoke with my sister about this. We were just in Denver last weekend, and she was like, "Hey, you always had so many friends. You were always talking and stuff like that." And I was always just so curious on why people do the things they do, because at a young age, very low confidence, very low a lot of things, and I didn't understand how if someone wasn't like perfect, why they could still be happy or why they were still happy. And that was just mind blowing for me at a young age because the mental health stuff, even though we were like a mental health, a lot of awareness in the family. My aunt was schizophrenic, my dad's bipolar, and we would go see a lot of therapists. It's still, for some reason, it didn't click for me for a long time. And like, people are just people. They make their decisions with how their life has led them to be. So yeah, I'm infinitely interested in people. But yeah,
If you think about it, we're all just kind of the sum of our choices,
yes.
right? Us here, I made a choice to jump on this and have a conversation, right?
Hmm.
Those choices to even get to the point where to ask you to jump back on or whatever,
Yeah.
and then just have a good conversation with you was spurred by the first time we did
Hmm.
this. Before then, it was I want to just get on podcasts. I don't know what it's going to look like or
Yeah.
whatever, but it seems fun. I don't know. And now I'm here, right? So like these things just kind of compound to that. You
Hmm.
throw in things like chemical misbalances and whatever. I've been medicated. I will honestly say that I've been medicated on anxiety. That was like a whole process since I don't know, since I was like 8 years old of like
Yeah.
what medications work, whatever. I don't tend to like, that process or going through that process. So that led me to, all right, I'm injured, right? Or like, I don't know, maybe if you want to look at it like a sports analogy, like I'm never going to play center for the LA Lakers, right?
Yeah.
I'm 6'3". They would, overlook me. Um, the truth is like what tools do you have? What do you
Right.
got? What's the best we can make out of this, right? Because me too, right? My aunt committed suicide, slow suicide. It was very interesting kind of process. Drank herself to death.
Yeah.
Um, and but the point was there was a point to return from it, right?
Hmm.
There was a point where it was like, hey, if you stop this, you have a fighting chance. If
Yeah.
you don't, then I will see you in a few weeks or whatever. Sure
Hmm.
enough, she ended up in a hospital bed and died, from liver cirrhosis at age 43, right?
Wow. How old were you at that time?
Younger, 20, mid 20s. I can't remember the
Okay.
exact but man, yeah, when was that? Probably about 6 years ago, 7 years ago.
Okay. So enough to fully understand what was going on.
And yep, and I have I've had cousins that have taken their lives, unfortunately, and look, like I know that like being in the next room to somebody that may be going through that issues as I'm seeing my therapist or whatever,
Yeah.
um, some of those thoughts, like you can have those thoughts. I won't say that I've kind of fully ideated them, but it's always kind of a thought of like, well, wouldn't it be easier just to like not do
Yeah.
all this stuff, right? You've dug yourself this hole, you
Mhm.
could just remove yourself from it. I really did for me personally. This is what worked for
Yeah.
me. I have to preface that because everybody is going to be different. Is that with everything, my relationships with my parents, my this business, everything, I've had to get to ground zero. I've had to almost hate it. Like
Mhm.
I had say nothing but good bad things about it, and then build from there of like the least common denominator. Okay, let's do one small thing that gets us going in the right direction that
Yeah.
we want to do, right? And I think we just get pulled so many different directions of these things that we think we want, or what other people want of us, or we're just constantly comparing, man. We're just constantly thinking like we should be something else when we don't really like listen internally and think like, who the hell do I want to be,
Yeah.
you know?
Do you think the uh as the question's in my head, I'll just ask it. Do you think it's more skill based or effort based as far as progress goes? Because I feel for me, sometimes I try too much on skill acquisition, like, oh, I'm going to make it easier before I start to try the thing, rather than I'm just going to put my head down and work on it and I'll get the skill as it goes. How do you feel like it works for you?
All right, let me phrase it this way for you,
Yeah,
right? If you tried archery, basketball, hockey, skiing, yada yada, and you're signed up for 7 classes of each different one each day, whatever, are you going to be good at like any one of those? You might, right? You might be.
that
And
that
so,
that was me during COVID.
I mean, and rightfully so. We're all
Yeah,
trying to like figure out, what sticks.
right,
And so the reason why I ask that is because it actually opens the door up to like it's different for
right.
everybody, right? Because somebody may do those things and realize, hey, I'm better at basketball,
Yeah,
or whatever, and gravitate towards that more naturally and then start going into basketball more. Some people like me, if I try way too many things at once without like being like, okay, here's my frame. I've got
yeah,
3 things I'm going to try. And, you know, whatever sticks, whatever seems to align more. Like after I filtered it down based off of like, okay, that seems a little extreme. I'm not going to become a carnivore diet person, right? Like that's
yeah,
not my role. Um, then I know what works with me. And to be honest, it's listening to yourself, trial and error, staying at it. And so when it comes down to it, the initial start, I think varies for everybody. But
yeah.
what keeps you going is the effort.
Hmm.
If you've got a plan, you got to stick with it. How can you say that it doesn't work if you try it every few weeks? You're like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
I should be shooting hoops right now or whatever. Like I'm not, my jumper's not going to get better if I'm going about it casually,
right.
right? Or whatever.
So,
So
what's been the latest thing that you wanted to do that you were able to add in? Not necessarily 100%, but what are you progressing on lately?
getting back in the gym, I
Okay.
mean, it's simple. It's just so crazy how your brain just rewires at that point once
Yeah,
you start like moving your body or whatever. And go into the science of that and everything, but simply put, like I was an athlete, I moved my hands, feet. Now I do a job where I sit at my desk most of the days,
hmm,
right? I can have a standing desk or whatever, but I feel like I have a body and mindset or whatever that just has to move.
yeah,
And so part of that process is moving and doing that in this 33-year-old body now that can't squat as much, can't bench as much, can't whatever. His back hurts more, knees
yeah,
hurt more, ankles hurt more, all these things, and just realizing, okay, this is what I can work for. I still have those days where it's like, wow, okay, that felt like the old days, and maybe through progress I can get even a little bit closer there.
yeah.
but I'm getting older as I'm talking, right? So that's the truth behind it, is that you really do have to like frame your reality, right?
So
And
was this a couple months ago that you're like, hey, I gotta get back into the gym, and then what was your process to where you are now?
it's something that I've always kind of light switched.
Okay.
I don't know. Eventually there is a process where I like look at myself in the mirror, take an inventory of like how I feel. And I don't know, to it sucks because at certain times, this is gonna sound really shallow and really vapid or whatever. You'll get people telling you, "Oh, you're fine. You look great."
Yeah.
Whatever. I don't feel fine. I don't
Mm.
look great in my mind. I don't like it,
Yeah.
whatever. And I know I can do something about it because I've done it before.
Right.
So, sometimes it is just a light switch of like, okay, what did you do? You used to
Yeah.
eat this way. Now, if I'm coming to something completely new, being a business owner, right? Getting a line of credit or whatever, right? Corporate taxes, you name it. I have to realize I'm a student at that
Yeah.
point, right? I'm going to be a student for a bit. Some things naturally you can pick up. Some things are just simply easy to pick up. Some things take work.
Yeah.
And especially if it's in the realm of things that you give a damn about, if you give a damn about it, then you have to go through that
Mm.
versus avoiding it ultimately.
Yeah. Love that. Before the last two questions, was there anything from last time, like story wise, or something that you forgot to mention, or this time that you wanted to throw out there?
Nothing really comes to mind, but I really do. I will say this,
Yeah.
pulling from the last one, right? I think one of the biggest importance is that realization. Going back to what you said, there's a few things I said in the last podcast that talks about just analyzing, just realizing like the world around you and your values and everything. That is still at the core of everything that I'm doing
Yeah.
today, right? I'm not going to take it, even extends into my business. I'm sorry, there's certain people that I'm not going to answer the phone on. I don't
Mm.
need every lead gen seller in my inbox that is trying to sell me 1,000 leads or
Yeah.
whatever, right? So the truth is you have to do the same filtering with yourself. And I think a lot of times we let in a lot of these negative thoughts that we're producing, and trust me, we've talked about it. I get the chemical sense. If you need
Yeah.
it, take medication, etc. However, there is the difference between where you want to be and where you're at. What does it take? What does it take
Mm.
to bridge that gap? And you realize that that may actually be a really, really tough journey. But
Yeah.
if you care to be on that, if you want to be a good business owner, if you want to still be here today, like what are you doing to
Mm.
do that and be happy with the first step? You have to congratulate yourself on that first step.
Yeah.
If you don't pick it up again and you don't take your second step for a while, then like just be happy that once you do, that you did,
Mm.
and start compounding that. You have to pat yourself on the back. And unfortunately, in this world, whether it's fake or whatever, you're going to get a lot of flattery, but you're not going to get a lot of substance
Yeah.
in a lot of cases. So
Absolutely. And we'll twist up the health question a little bit. Remind us again what your definition of health is, and then how is your pursuit of health going?
I like to tackle health on three fronts. There is your spiritual side, there is your mental side, and then there is your physical side. And the spiritual side is your guiding compass, right? Like at the end of the day, it's your moral compass, what's good and what's bad. Your mental side, and it's also your value. Your mental side has to siphon this, filter it, create it, get your body to do the things that you need to do.
Mm.
Simple as get yourself out of bed, right? um, which is not always so simple. So once you are you again, you can approach it the way that we just talked about, take on all three at the same time, and it could work for you.
Yeah.
Some people may need to work on one and then work on the next and work on the next, but when you're aligned, I feel good. I like the thoughts that I'm having. I know I'm aging or whatever, but I'm putting my best foot forward every single day. and taking these stressors and breathing more and like doing more meditations. Sure, it was only 5 out of the 7 days, but I have to be happy with that because that's what I could produce, you
Yeah.
know? So that is my definition of health, is what that looks like for you. If you are content and you felt like you've bridged that gap to where you want to be,
Mm,
I would say that your next step would just be like, what's the next gap,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. I love that. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. This episode is brought to you by Vital Athlete. And listen up, this could make a real difference. I've been using Vital Athlete Freeze Roll On for the last 6 months. I stopped using regular painkillers about 10 years ago because of the negative side effects on your liver and kidneys. Vital Athletes understands this. They've created a CBD roll-on specifically for pain and injury relief. Their Freeze Roll-On gives you fast-acting relief right where you need it, so you can keep going. If you care about getting the most out of every workout, then Vital Athlete is for you.